In this section, we're going to be talking about function notation, which goes with section 3.6 of your textbook. This right here, this f of x equals, is what we call function notation, and we read it f of x. So when you see that f parentheses x, that does not mean that you are multiplying f times x. It represents a function that has a variable of x in it. And essentially, f of x means the same thing as y. But we can use it for to get other information. So if I had f of 8 instead of f of x, what that means that we're going to do is replace all of the x's with whatever number is in those parentheses. So instead of 5x plus 3, I'll have 5 times 8 plus 3, which would give me 40 plus 3, which is 43. So f of 8 equals 43 means that 8 is the x value and 43 is the y value when x is 8. So what we can do with function notation is we can use function notation when it says something like f of 8 equals 43 to create an ordered pair, which would have 8 in the x spot and 43 in the y spot. If I have y equals 5x plus 3, I can do the same thing. I just wouldn't be able to write f of 8 equals. I would just have to substitute 8 in for the x, and when I got done, I would have y equals 43. So this function notation is just kind of shorthand that allows us to give a little bit more information as we're going. So we're going to have a couple of different types of problems that I'm going to ask you to do. One of the types is if I give you an equation, I might ask you to find f of a number like we just did. So given an equation, there could be a couple of different instructions. One, I could ask you to find f of a number. Now, when we just did that problem, f of a number means that we are going to replace x with that number and then solve for y. So f of a number means to replace all x's with that number that's in parentheses and solve for y. A different instruction I could ask you to do would be to find x when f of x equals a number. And if you're given that instruction, then what you're going to do is replace the f of x side with the number that they gave you, and then solve for x. So we'll do a couple of problems using those instructions here. So this is going to be my function, f of x equals negative 1/2 x plus 4. If it asks me to find f of 10, that means I'm going to replace this x with a 10 inside parentheses. So f of 10 means I'll take negative 1/2, and instead of an x, I'm going to put a parenthesis with a 10 in it, and then plus 4. We're not going to do anything at all to this left-hand side. We're going to leave it f of 10. But on the right-hand side, we're then going to follow the order of operations. So we'll multiply negative 1/2 times 10. Remember, negative 1/2 times 10 over 1. We multiply straight across. So that's negative 10 over 2, which simplifies to negative 5. So we'll have negative 5 plus 4. Then we'll add those two numbers together. So f of 10 would equal negative 1. Now I also want to know what ordered pairs would be on the graph. So from this ordered pair, remember that 10 is the x value, negative 1 is the y value. So the ordered pair would be 10, negative 1. When we're asked to do the other instructions, find x when f of x equals a number, this one is asking me to find x when f of x equals 16. So in that case, I'm going to replace the f of x, which is on the left side of the equal sign, with the number they gave me, which is 16. So I'll write 16 equals negative 1/2 x plus 4. Now, I'm not super fond of dealing with that fraction. So remember that the strategy we have when we've got a fraction in our problem is to multiply every term by the denominator. So I'm just going to multiply this guy times 2, this guy times 2, this guy times 2. So that's going to give me 32 equals, the 2's cancel, I get negative 1x plus 8. And now I'm going to go ahead and solve for x. So I'll subtract 8. That gives me 24 equals negative 1x. Divide by negative 1. And I get negative 24 equals x. So this would be my answer, x equals negative 24. And if I wanted to put it in an ordered pair, remember that f of x really means y. So my y value would be 16, my x value would be negative 24. So that would be negative 24, 16. Now, sometimes they are going to give you something other than a number in that parenthesis. So on this example, we have for f of x equals x cubed minus 5x squared minus 3, we're supposed to find f of t. Well, in function notation, that just means whatever is in that parenthesis here is what we're going to replace the x's with. So this means to replace all x's with t in a parenthesis. So f of t will be, instead of x cubed, I'll have parenthesis t cubed, and then minus 5 parenthesis t squared minus 3. So the only thing I've done is take the x's and replace them with a parenthesis with a t in it. And then I'll go ahead and do these exponents. So t to the third power will be t cubed minus 5 times t squared, and then minus 3. That's it. We don't get a number for these kinds of problems. We just get a function with a different variable in it in this case, because there's a t in the parenthesis. That tells me that I'm going to have t's in my equation over there. Now this one kind of means the same thing, except instead of replacing with t's, we're going to replace all of the x's with a parenthesis that has a negative x in it. So I'll have f of negative x would be, instead of x cubed, I'll have parenthesis negative x cubed, and then minus 5 parenthesis negative x squared minus 3. Then I'm going to go ahead and multiply these out. So remember that when I have something that's cubed, it means times itself 3 times. So when I take negative x times negative x, that's going to give me positive x squared. Take that times negative x again, and that's going to give me negative x cubed. So f of negative x, I'll replace this with negative x cubed. And then negative x squared would be negative x times negative x. Negative x times negative x is positive x squared. And then I'm multiplying it times the negative 5 out in front. So that will be minus 5x squared. And then the minus 3 just stays the same. So this would be our answer for f of negative x. Another thing they can ask you to do with function notation is to look at a graph and answer some questions. So let's look at this graph. This happens to be a type of absolute value graph here. And they're asking us to find f of 2. So we want to think about, what does that mean? F of 2 means that x equals 2, and f of 2 is going to be the y value when x is 2. So the way that we'll find that is by looking on our graph, and here's where x equals 2. So I go onto my graph and I see what the ordered pair is there, and that ordered pair is 2, 1. So f of 2 means the y value when x is 2. So I would say that f of 2 equals 1. F of negative 4. So we're kind of going to do the same thing again. F of negative 4 means x is negative 4, and this is asking you what is y when x is negative 4. So we go to our graph, we find where x equals negative 4, and we look up here, and we're just going to pretend that it's like up here. So it's a nice number. And we'll say that ordered pair is negative 4, 2, because that's what I wanted it to be when I graphed it, but I made my tick marks not the right size. So we'll pretend it's negative 4, 2, and then we would say f of negative 4 would equal 2, because that would be the y value for the ordered pair when x is negative 4. Now this last kind is the trickier kinds. It wants you to find x when f of x equals 1. So remember, this is our y value. So when y equals 1, what is x? So in other words, we have to find ordered pairs on our graph that would be some number, comma, 1. So we're going to find the y value of 1 on our graph. That's here when y is 1. And I want to find all the ordered pairs that are 1 unit high. So the easiest thing to do is to kind of draw a horizontal line on your graph like that and see what ordered pairs connect with our graph. We already have 1 labeled right here at 2, 1. So that will be one of our x values. X will equal 2. We already had that labeled. And then if we look at this other ordered pair right here, this one also has a y value of 1. And that is at the ordered pair negative 2, 1. So x will equal 2, and it will also equal negative 2, because there's 2 ordered pairs on there that have a y coordinate of 1. Let's look at a graph that's a bit more complicated with those same types of questions. G of negative 1 equals. G of negative 1 means x is negative 1, and we want to know what y is. So I'll find where x is negative 1, that's here, and I'll look at the ordered pair. That ordered pair is negative 1, 1. So G of negative 1 asks us the question, what's the y value? So the answer is 1. G of 5 equals, same kind of question. When x is 5, what is y? So we find where x is 5 on our graph. It's right here. We follow it up to our g of x, put that ordered pair, and that ordered pair is 5, 2. So g of 5 asks us the question, what is y when x is 5? And that answer is 2. Okay, letter C. Letter C is asking us, what is x when g of x is 0? Remember, g of x is like f of x. That means that our y value is 0. So we are looking for ordered pairs that have a number, comma, 0. And if you remember from previous lessons, things that are in this format, a number, comma, 0, are x-intercepts. So on my graph, I will be looking for ordered pairs that have a number, comma, 0, which will be x-intercepts. So on there, I have this guy right here at -5, 0. I have one here at 0, 0. And I have one here at 3, 0. So when it asks what is x when g of x equals 0, that has three answers. X would be -5 or 0 or 3, because those are all the x values that have ordered pairs with 0 for y. Our last one. What is x when g of x equals 3? So again, this is a y value. So we're looking for ordered pairs that have a number and then 3 for the y coordinate. So if I go to 3 on the y-axis, and kind of like we did on our last one, if I draw like a horizontal line all the way through, how many answers will I have for that question? Well, I'll have one here, here, and here. So I just need to label those ordered pairs. So this one looks like -2, 3. This one looks like -3, 3. And then this one looks like 6, 3. So the question wants to know, what is the x value when the y value is 3? So those answers would be x equals -3 at that one, -2 at that one, and then over here, x also equals 6.